This presentation explores socioeconomic diversity. To begin, let's discuss the meaning of some terms that will be used throughout the presentation. The first is diversity. Diversity is the condition of having or being composed of differing elements. This includes people of different races, religions, ages, education, cultures, genders, etc. The second term that we need to be familiar with is socioeconomic status.
Socioeconomic status (SES) is an economic and sociological combined total measure of a person's work experience and of an individual's or family's economic and social position in relation to others, based on income, education, and occupation.
SES is a way of describing someone's social standing or class. Finally, we will define socioeconomic diversity. This is a diversity in a group of people based on income levels, social backgrounds, and in some cases, racial and ethnic backgrounds. As teachers, we need to be aware of how this type of diversity will affect our students. Two major influences in a child's life are their family and community. Students that come from low SES households do not gain as much knowledge prior to attending school as those from higher SES households. Literacy gaps in children from different SES backgrounds exist before formal schooling begins. The children are also less likely to have experiences that encourage the development of fundamental skills of reading acquisition, such as vocabulary and oral language. Children's initial reading competency is correlated with the number of books owned by the family, and poor households tend to have less access to learning materials such as books, computers, and educational toys. Low SES households tend to put less emphasis on the importance of education and do not have the expectation that the children will attend college. It also doesn't help that children from low SES households are less likely to have access to information about college, therefore are less likely to attend schooling beyond high school. If they do attend some sort of higher education, it is more likely for them to accrue loan debt that exceed the national average. The community in which a child grows up in can have a major impact on a child's success in life. Since the majority of funding for public schools comes from tax dollars, low-income areas tend to have schools that receive less money. Since they receive less money, they tend to have less resources. Research indicates that school conditions contribute more to differences in learning rates than family characteristics do. The students at these schools have less access to library resources than the middle-class children. The importance of reading has been well documented and is vital to the success of children. Also, since these schools have less money, they are less likely to have well-qualified teachers. A teacher's years of experience and quality of training are correlated with children's academic achievement. We know that children in low-income areas aren't being given the same chances as children from higher income areas. They are not provided with the same resources and opportunities. So what can we do to improve this? In improving schools in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas, the authors discuss 6 ways to improve the community, which includes the school, to help improve the future outlook of the low-income students. The first suggestion is to improve teaching and learning. It is difficult for low-income schools to get and retain highly qualified teachers. We need to work on some sort of incentive to draw well-trained teachers to these schools. The second is to create an information-rich environment. This would mean giving the students access to more reading materials, computers, educational activities, etc. The third suggestion is to encourage a learning community. This would mean getting the community members involved in the education of the children. They could present to the children, volunteer in the school, or donate needed materials. If the students see that this many people care about their education, then they may put more emphasis on the importance of it as well. The fourth suggestion is to offer ongoing professional development to the teachers. This would continue to improve the teaching and learning in the classrooms. The fifth is to increase parent involvement. The more involved the parents are, the more likely the student is to succeed. The final is to get external support and resources. This could come from community members, from grants, or government funding. It is so vital for these students to have access to as many resources as possible, so it is important for the schools to find any way they can to provide these resources. Many of these needed resources are provided by the government. Politicians and other elected officials, such as judges, make many decisions that affect our education system. One of the most famous and influential decisions dealing with segregation in education was Brown v. Board of Education. Other more recent decisions have been No Child Left Behind and the Every Student Succeeds Act. These and many other decisions that affect our education system have been made by elected officials. These elected officials get their power from the voting Americans. Wealthy Americans vote at much higher rates than those of lower socioeconomic status. During the 2012 presidential election, only 48% of eligible voters making less than $20,000 a year voted, compared to 78% of those making over $475,000. Studies have shown that this difference in turnout affects public policy. Politicians are more likely to respond to the desires of their wealthy constituents than of their poorer constituents, in part because more of their wealthy constituents vote. Since the voters from low SES status are not voting, they are not getting the chance to change the way elected officials affect education. Therefore, the low-income schools are not getting the attention they need. Since SES affects overall human functioning, it would be wise for politicians to take the time to improve education at all income levels. Society benefits from an increased focus on the foundations of socioeconomic inequities and efforts to reduce the deep gaps in socioeconomic status. Low SES generally leads to lower educational achievement, poverty, and poor health, which ultimately affect our society. Students from low socioeconomic situations are more likely to face different challenges than their fellow students from higher income families. The cultural norms for the low-income students can be very different than the norms of the higher income students, and all of these difficulties can have great effects on the education of these students. These students can have difficulty staying awake, concentrating, remaining engaged, attending school regularly, being on time to school, responding appropriately to authority figures, completing and turning homework in on time, bringing materials to class, communicating with others, performing on grade level, and staying in school until graduation. With the knowledge that students are experiencing this many challenges at home, teachers have to change the way they interact with their students. Teachers need to get to know their students. Teachers can also create a structured and well-managed classroom. Having an unstructured and poorly managed classroom is likely to increase anxiety for students who already have highly stressful lives. Teachers should use evidence-based practices. These students may not have access to educational resources or supports outside of school, so teachers should use evidence-based practices to maximize students' learning. Teachers must motivate and engage students. These students might have low self-esteem and might not receive a lot of positive reinforcement in the home. Therefore, teachers need to provide positive feedback to the students. These students are often less engaged in school, so teachers should build relationships with them to find their strengths and interests to make learning relevant. Teachers must also support students. Since it is possible that students will not have access to resources such as computers outside of school, teachers need to be flexible and understanding with assignments. Finally, teachers should involve families. This can be difficult when parents are working multiple jobs, lack childcare, have unreliable transportation, or have negative experiences with schools. Therefore, teachers should work to build a trusting relationship with parents and be flexible with them to find times and locations that work well for meetings. The more parents participate, the better student achievement will be. Diversity of many forms can be beneficial for students. SES diversity is no different. Research shows that socioeconomic diversity in schools can improve student scores on standardized tests, it can reduce the number of students who enter the criminal justice system, and it can improve graduation rates. Parents of higher income families tend to be more involved in school, which benefits every child in the school. Research also shows that students of higher socioeconomic status do not suffer academically when in a socioeconomically diverse school. In conclusion, we can see that students from low-income families that live in low-income areas face many challenges that affect their education. It is important for teachers to realize these challenges and work to equal the playing field. We as teachers have the opportunity to affect these students' lives personally, but we also need to work to change their lives at a societal level by influencing political policies and government spending. It is equally about change within oneself, or change in the larger dimensions of society cannot occur without significant change in one's own perception, attitudes, and skills.